Port Hedland is now a major deep-water port and is supported by the satellite town of South Hedland and the industrial area of Wedgfield. There's a large modern shopping centre and all the normal facilities available in large towns. In the 2004-05 season, Port Hedland became the first port in Australia to export more than 1 million tonnes of iron ore. It's envisaged that this would more than double in the following years. The capacity of the port is thought to be in excess of 500 million tonnes. South Hedland was developed as a dormitory town to house the workers in an area away from the tidal mudflats. This is where the main facilities are located. But up near the port, there's still a small shopping centre. The road infrastructure in the area has vastly improved in recent times, and there are no longer long lines of heavy vehicles waiting impatiently for their chance to continue their journey at the old T-junction that used to become such a bottleneck. The town near the port still has a few old buildings, but the drive for modernisation has seen a gradual change in the character of this once historic area. The best places for tourists to visit in close proximity to the town are Cook Point, Pretty Pool and the port area itself. It's also hard to miss the Snow Mountain, a huge pile of salt that continues to grow by the side of Wilson Street. Hedland is still very much a working town, and like its neighbour Karratha, it gets hit hard by any mining downturns that occur. The climate for 9 months of the year is either hot and wet or hot and dry. It's only from May to July that the area becomes popular with tourists who come north to escape the cold, wet winters. The coastline near Port Hedland was first explored by Europeans in the 17th century, when a number of Dutch vessels bound for Batavia sailed too far south and found the Australian coast instead. In 1616, Dirk Hartog passed through the area, and in 1628, Gerrit de Wit ran aground just west of the current site of Port Hedland. During the 1860s, a number of explorers, including F.T. Gregory, came through the area. In April 1863, Captain Peter Hedland anchored his cutter Mystery in a large natural harbour, which he named Mangrove Harbour. Captain Hedland was searching for a place to land stock being carried by the barque Tensian for the De Grey station further east. However, due to severe tides and the lack of fresh water, Hedland returned south to a smaller harbour, which became known as Tientsin and later renamed Cossack. Peter Hedland operated his small ship along the northwest coast and made frequent journeys to Fremantle to collect supplies for the pastoralists. He was a vital lifeline for the early settlers, and it's fitting that his name is associated with one of the largest centres in the northwest. Mystery surrounds his death, but it's thought he may have been speared by Aborigines. His body was never found. He was survived by his wife and 11 children. It's often claimed that he was of Dutch origin, but living relatives in Western Australia say he was Swedish. 3 years after Peter Hedland discovered it, Mangrove Harbour was investigated as a possible town site and port by surveyor Charles Wedge. He concluded that there was a difficulty of access which, when combined with the lack of good natural water, made settlement difficult. Charles Nairn arrived in 1863 to establish De Grey River Station, after travelling 260 kilometres from Cossack. In the late 1870s, Port Hedland, like Broome further north, gained a reputation as a wild frontier settlement, as pearling luggers began using it as a stopover point. At one time, the port was home to over 150 luggers and their crews. At this time, the town was serving surrounding pastoral interests. Interest in the area was rekindled in 1891 when exports from Nullagine and Marble Bar, southeast of Port Hedland, became too much for the Cossack port. Port Hedland town site was gazetted in October 1896. A jetty and an 8-kilometre causeway over the marshes was completed in 1899. The first shipment of gold bullion was exported in 1900, and Port Hedland rapidly emerged as the Pilbara's major port. The Aboriginal name for the area was Marapikarinya, place of good water. This is interesting, as early explorers had a lot of trouble finding any good potable water. Water shortages in the area persisted until 1953. Transport from Marble Bar to the coast was difficult, and in 1911 the government built a railway from the coast to the gold mining town. The line operated until October 1951 and lost over £1,144,000 during its lifetime. Hedland overshadowed its nearby neighbour Condon, near the mouth of the Grey River, and as Hedland expanded, Condon dwindled. In the end, Condon ceased to exist at all. From the end of World War I until the development of the region's iron ore industry in the mid-1960s, Port Hedland operated as a typical remote port, exporting wool, livestock, gold, pearl shell, and importing supplies for the small and isolated communities in the hinterland. Mangrove flats cut off the town from the hinterland, and at high tide it was sometimes impossible to cross, even though a causeway had been constructed. The town was bombed by the Japanese during World War II, but the loss of life was much lighter than either in Broome or in Darwin. Although the town site was actually gazetted in 1896, it wasn't until the 1960s, with the discovery of iron ore, that the port facility really began to grow rapidly. On the 27th of May 1966, the first bulk ore carrier berthed at Port Hedland, and the modern era of ore shipments had begun. It does seem a little sad, though, that Australia digs up its resources, sends them overseas to be turned into product, and then buys them back at multiple times the price we got for it. If governments had been a little more far-sighted and really did care about this country, then our raw materials would be processed here on shore.